evening. Welcome to the Monday, September 16th agenda for the City Council work session. Can we start with roll call, please?
Sure, Mayor. Ms. Connolly?
Here.
Ms. Flynn? Here. Ms. Hiscott?
Here.
Mr. Schneider?
Here.
Ms. Underhill?
Here.
Mayor Hardy?
Here.
Thank you, Council.
Okay, I know we've got some meaty items tonight. But before we get started, I wanted to officially thank staff for a really busy weekend in the city. I think it was very successful on all accounts between the Fall Festival with the 75th anniversary culmination, plus the Taste of Falls Church, and then the Ed Foundation for a 20th year run for the schools, and then Welcoming Week kicking off in Falls Church. So thank you for all the hard work. I know that events like that are not pulled off easily, and so it was a busy weekend all around. So please pass on our thanks to everybody.
Well, we certainly will. Thank you, Mayor Hardy. And
I'll second that.
it was great to have all the city council members there, but city staff and the community take a lot of pride in these events. It takes a lot of coordination, a lot of hard work, and I think it was a great weekend in the city.
Great. Okay, let's get into the work sessions.
All right, so our first item up is a briefing from staff on the Greening of Lincoln project, and Tony Dudley is our stalwart project manager for this, and he will detail the many meetings that he's had with residents of the street, working through kind of listening and processing input from residents on the street, and then working through to arrive at decisions that we think represent a good synthesis of the input that we've received, and in some instances some compromises between competing views, but always staying aligned with the original purposes of this project, which Tony will describe. We do have a few budget implications of the changes that have come about through the public input as well. The project budget is over $11 million at this point, so we do want to talk about those numbers with council. We do have a strategy on how to address that, and we have Caitlin Sobsey here who can help talk about some of those numbers and some of those strategies. And this could then flow in to the council's year-end financial report and budget amendment discussion that will be happening at your next meeting in a week. So with that introduction, I do want to thank our staff, Tony in particular, for all the work you've put into the project, and to all of our community members who've been so engaged on this as well. Andy, I don't know if you had any other introductory comments, or whether we just turn it straight over to Tony.
I'll turn it over to Tony.
Okay, Mr. Dudley.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tony Dudley. I'm the Stormwater Project Manager for the City of Falls Church, DPW. And I thank you again to Council and City Manager's Office for allowing me to come and speak to you this evening about our project, the Greening of Lincoln. The Greening of Lincoln project, I don't want to sound too formal. This is a kind of an informal work session, so I sound like I'm in front of Congress or something. The Greening of Lincoln project spans from Northwest Street to the west, all the way to the Arlington County line to the east. It crosses several roads along the way: Northwest Street, Spring Street, North Oak, Greenwich, Great Falls, Meridian, Walden, and finally Yucatan, where it then exits the county, or the city, excuse me. The project goals, we had many project goals to cover for this particular project. The first and foremost was flood mitigation and water quality enhancements. We've had a history of flooding along Lincoln Avenue. The drainage, the infrastructure out there is probably as old as the railroad bed out there. A lot of the pipes date back to when there was actually a railroad running along that corridor. Another one was enhanced green space. We wanted to, in some instances, try to reduce some of the unused parking and underused parking in order to, one, create more green space out along the corridor, but also to help us with reducing the overall impervious area along the corridor. That in turn helps us with permitting the project, because in a lot of instances, believe it or not, the state requires us to pay to a mitigation fund in order to do this kind of work, even though we're trying to work on the storm drainage and improve the storm drainage, they treat us just like they would treat a developer in that process. And so we're trying to do our best in reducing the cost of the permitting. ADA compliancy was a big one too. Right now, the sidewalks are at best 4 foot wide, and all of them have poles that go right down the middle, as you'll see later. Next was traffic calming. Based on the public's review of the project early in the process, before I even came along, there was a need to do traffic calming along that corridor. And then certainly last but not least was increased pedestrian safety. With the sidewalks being as narrow as they were, people had to walk in the road, sight distances were an issue, crosswalks were an issue, so we wanted to see that play out as well. So some considerations that we had to take under consideration included the existing condition studies that we've done out there, local ordinances. I won't read all of these, you have them in front of you. Grant compliance is another one that we needed to adhere to, because the money we're spending has to be spent for a particular reason, for a very specific reason. So there are some things that the money could not be used for. Green infrastructure benefits, that was something that when I came on board with the city some 3 years ago, council was pretty heavy on trying to incorporate green infrastructure into the city's stormwater infrastructure. From a roadway sidewalk standpoint, we had to deal with perceived property boundaries. Even though you might have right-of-way lines that are further back in people's yards, people have adopted that front yard and front area of the right-of-way as their own and don't want to see it changed. Parking was an issue, has been an issue, and will continue to be an issue, it seems like, as long as we do this project. Site distances is another one that we talked about. We had to, we're looking at all of the intersections out there for site distance components. More planting and vegetation. Lighting is another one that we'll cover later on, not as part of this project, but certainly something that we'll have to deal with eventually. And then school buses and bus stops. Yes, we did talk to the schools and got their take on where bus stops were, making sure that all radiuses, all turning radiuses could be handled by school buses and the like. So there's a lot of stuff on that screen, but it's just to kind of show you, starting as far back as into 2021, on when the neighborhood got involved, and then when we got involved in 2022 to kind of bring the project along, and then you see the design kickoff is where, which is this year, where most of the work has been done. But I want to kind of focus in on some of the things that we've done this year as part of public involvement. You guys were updated on the project back in January of this year. There wasn't a lot of information. We had just come out of the planning phase and we're just starting the design phase at that time. The CACT was updated for the second time. Actually, we've been to them twice, and my friend Arthur wants a third time for us to come and talk to them. Our first public meeting was held in February, where a lot of you were there, kind of saw the interaction with the community. It was standing room only in council chambers, so we had a great amount of participation. The Planning Commission was briefed in April of this year. So was the Public Utility Commission. After our public meeting, I had several informal meetings with property owners. That included one-on-one, where I was sitting in people's dining rooms or living rooms looking out on their front yard to show them what we were doing. It included group meetings where there might have been anywhere from 3 to 10 people involved. I remember one where that took place up in the Yucatan, where most of the meeting were the property owners talking to each other and not me talking to them. So that was pretty exciting, but it gave us a lay of the land as far as what we needed to do. We followed that up with 4 formal evening block meetings. I say evening because we had them at a time where people could come after work and walk the project with us, and we could show them exactly what was going on and point to the specific things that we thought were important. I have to say that these meetings were also well-intended, and I felt like we reached consensus at each one of those meetings as to the work to be done. Let's talk about the study area watersheds. Up here you see it actually, there's 4 watersheds in the project area. Watersheds meaning, just a quick definition, watershed is simply an area where water rain that falls on it will drain to a single point, essentially. We have 4 of them in this area. We have the Ellison branch, which is in blue, Coe branch, which is in green. I should say Ellison and Coe eventually drain to Trips Run. And then we have Trammell branch as well as the Shadow Walk branch. Shadow Walk is a subcomponent of the Trammell branch. You might remember we did a project on Trammell branch down on the WNOD just earlier this last year. Just to show you what our current conditions look like for Coe and for Trammell, you can see where essentially we have a lot of localized flooding. Some of that surface flooding, this is the 10-year event, which is another way of saying it has a 10% chance of occurring in any given year. But you can see where Lincoln Avenue is, there should be no flooding for the 10-year on Lincoln Avenue. We have undersized pipes that cause backup. We have poor curb and gutter drainage, which floods residence yards and basements. And we have repeated flooding of Lincoln Park. This is a diagram that shows the flooding for the 10-year storm event on Lincoln Avenue in the Ellison branch area. That's in the 900 block of Lincoln, where you may be familiar with the house that has a flood wall essentially sitting in its driveway to stop water from coming over the curb and down into their house. So here are some of the flooding in the park. This is a pretty constant thing. It stays there for a couple of days. Our project will look to improve that. The picture to the right is actually a manhole. You can see, does the pointer on this work? Yeah, you can see, let me get up. You know, I operate a lot better standing up, that's why my voice is. But you can see here, this is a manhole that the tree has kind of grown around. And so that's indicative of the type of structure problems and infrastructure problems that we're dealing with out here on Lincoln Avenue. And here's some of the issues that we're dealing with as far as the sidewalks are concerned. We have very narrow sidewalks where utility poles are in the middle of them. We have very wide streets. We do have utility conflicts and failing pavement. Also, any of the neighbors would tell you we have speed control issues because of the wide streets, and also pedestrian safety issues. I think someone was hit on their bike just about a month ago, if that. So these are all issues that we have to tend with, and the question is always out there, why don't you bury the utility poles? Well, you know, we joke that if you go to Dominion Power and say, hey, can we bury these utility poles? They'll say, it'll cost you $1 billion to do that. Well, it won't cost you $1 billion, but it will cost you several hundred million, tens of millions of dollars to do that. Because you got to remember that not only is Dominion on the pole, but also every other utility is on the pole as well. And all of those guys want their own corridor to put their infrastructure in, and it just becomes very expensive very fast when you're dealing with that. So this is a little bit small, and maybe you guys can see it on your computers, but I just wanted to show you this because we did develop a decision matrix on dealing with these particular types of, on dealing with these some of the issues out here. I can't see that, so I know you can't see it. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to get a little closer here and just talk about a few. For the stormwater improvements, say, for example, for water quality, you know, we our considerations were low impact development, green infrastructure, green space and vegetation. What did we decide to do? Well, we decided to do bioretention facilities. We're going to do street trees. Oh, thank you. We're going to do street trees as well as reduce pavement in the area. For flood mitigation, we had to deal with, do we deal with present day flood risk or future flood risk? Do we upsize the existing infrastructure? Do we use detention facilities? Do we increase the capacity to meet the 10-year storm event? Well, we do upsize the system and we do meet the 10-year storm event, but we deal with present day risk because of the fact that the area is not going to develop into like commercial or anything like that over the time. So we feel like using existing conditions will be enough to satisfy us and to have some lifespan on the project. So for roadway elements, travel lanes, minimum for vehicles is 9 feet. Minimum for emergency access is 11 feet. Well, we went for 11 feet. We stuck with 11 feet because emergency vehicles are important. You want them to be able to get around. And so that's what we decided to go with. For traffic calming, we went with both raised crosswalks, also speed tables we're going to put in areas where before in our earlier designs, we had crosswalks that crossed over the street, kind of going to nowhere. We eliminated those crosswalks, but we still feel like we need to have raised tables in order to control the speed in there, as well as reducing the width of the road because most, if not all, traffic engineers will tell you the way to slow traffic down is to reduce the width of the road, either visually or literally reduce the width of the road. For project area limits is another important one. Do we use all of the right-of-way? Or do we go for easement acquisition as well? Well, we decided to use the right-of-way because most of the issues and complaints that we got were people saying, do not encroach into my front yard. I can't tell you how many times we heard that particular saying, don't encroach. I just got a call today, as a matter of fact, from a lady that lives at 917 saying, hey, make sure you don't encroach in my yard. So, and you guys may have even seen that because I know she copied all of you guys on another email. And then for pedestrian facilities, we did a lot of curb extensions. Of course, we're doing crosswalks. And again, we're keeping the sidewalk out of people's existing front yards and using that as a place to establish a line in the sand and moving those out. We're doing 6-foot sidewalks in most parts of the project and 7-foot sidewalks on other parts of the project. So here's an example of some of the stormwater features that we may include on the project. We know we have at least a couple of areas that we'll be including these types of project things on. One includes the American Legion property. Another place is in front of 508, where we have a long stretch of underused parking where we use these types of structures. These pictures actually come from DC. And DC's been a fairly good leader in promoting what they call pocket BMPs, trying to fit these types of structures into an urban environment, which of course we are. Your standard BMPs tend to be, well, I joke, say out in the middle of the field, where it's pretty much you can build anything, but these things really fit in an urbanized area. And they look good too. Some other stormwater features that we're going to use are pervious pavement. There's an example of it to the left there. We use that quite a bit in some areas, as well as underground detention. We don't have any room for above ground detention, but we are negotiating with the American Legion to put this type of detention facility in their parking lot. Here's an example. We do plan for some underground detention in the park underneath the existing basketball court. So that'll minimize the amount of disruption we have the vegetation there, but it will help in throttling down the flow as we get it to the W&OD, which is still a little, the pipe size down there are still a little bit undersized. So we want to be able to throttle a lot of this water back before it goes down. Coe Branch is another place where we'll throttle that water back so we don't have any downstream implications. So it's this, at this point that I want to have Caitlin talk about the funding and the budget that we have for the project.
Thanks. Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Caitlin Sobsey, CIP Coordinator, also in Public Works, and I'm here with Tony tonight to speak to this slide on the funding and budget. I'm also going to refer a lot to the staff report, the fiscal impact section specifically of the staff report. Did the pointer work? I might need it. The immediate fiscal impact in the staff report tonight is $330,000 in additional local funding. An appropriation will be requested as part of an upcoming budget amendment later this fall. The first table there on the left is a summary of project cost broken down into the, and we can't make that any bigger, right? Sorry. I'm sorry, the first table is a summary of the project cost broken down into sort of the program areas of stormwater and transportation, because in this project we have both, right? And then also the funding eligibility of grants. Under stormwater, we have a project subtotal of $7.2 million. That entire amount is eligible for grant funds through ARPA. We have federal and state ARPA sources, and then also another state stormwater grant, which is called SLAF. Under transportation, we have the roadbed reconstruction and the sidewalk project scope. That total is $3.9 million right now. That is all eligible for a VDOT state grant through the revenue sharing program. That's actually, we've increased that project scope. It was initially just a roadbed reconstruction that we have a grant for through VDOT. We've increased that project scope to include more of the sidewalk improvements, the sidewalk missing links and curb ramps and widening in areas where we can. The reason that we've been able to do that is because of something called PROWAG, which stands for Public Right-of-Way Accessibility Guidelines, which is a federal guideline. It was just approved or published in 2023. It's a federal guideline that requires us to update pedestrian facilities in the public right-of-way above and beyond the previous ADA guidelines. So that's how we made that extra sidewalk scope eligible for this VDOT grant, is we use PROWAG to say, you know, where the work scope was not eligible before, it now is. So we've increased that to $3.9 million for the roadbed reconstruction and most of the sidewalk. The last little section I have right there is a little sliver of sidewalk work that is not eligible for grant funding from VDOT because it's not required by PROWAG. So that is what I'm calling the ineligible sidewalk improvements. And that amount is $330,000 and $306 to be exact. So that's our grand project total of $11.5 million. On the right, on the second table, I've summarized all the same stuff, but I've broken it down into the funding source and status. So for the $7.2 million of stormwater funding, we already have $5.1 million of ARPA already allocated and for that to that project. Then we have an additional almost $2.1 million of the SLAF grant that I mentioned. That's technically pending. It is appropriated to the city in the state budget. It's just pending an executed agreement with DEQ for the funds. But that makes up the $7.2 million of stormwater. For under transportation, for the roadbed and the sidewalk funding, we have a VDOT grant already appropriated in our budget and in the state's budget of $2.7 million. We are requesting an additional almost $1.3 million for the PROWAG sidewalk. And so that is also pending. We don't have an agreement for that, and technically, the funding is not appropriated to us in the state's budget yet, but we've been actively working that. Staff has been actively working that with VDOT. They so far agree with our stance that that sidewalk is required by ProWag and agree that it's eligible for the grant funds and have been very cooperative, so I'm very optimistic about getting those additional funds and getting an agreement before the end of, before we reach 100% design. But that's why that is, those things are pending technically. So that's the 3.9 million for roadbed and sidewalk. And then, of course, we have the little sliver that I mentioned, the $330,000 for the ineligible sidewalk work, which would be requested for additional local funding in the budget amendment. And then, so this funding scenario that I have laid out here, this makes a couple of assumptions, and this is what is laid out in the staff report starting on line 142. Here are the assumptions. Number one, we assume that the current scope of this, the scope of the project as it's defined in the concept is finalized and that significant design changes are not needed. Significant design changes would obviously change our estimate, as well as a lot of other moving parts. So if this design, you know, that's being presented tonight is finalized and nothing significant is changing, that's what we're, you know, that's one assumption that we're making. The second one and the third one are both the pending grant funds. So we assume that we're going to get the executed agreement for the SLAF grant and the stormwater funding is going to be complete. And then we assume that we're going to get the additional funds from VDOT and we're going to execute that agreement, and that budget will be whole as well. And then the fourth assumption is that the pending $330,000 would be appropriated through some type of budget action by council. Again, the immediate fiscal impact of this is the $330,000. That's really the deficit that we're working with right now. But there are longer term impacts to the holistic 6-year CIP. And this is sort of what's described on starting, I think, line 158 in the staff report. The VDOT grant that we have requested additional funds for is a 50-50, it's through the revenue sharing program. I will usually refer to it as Rev Share. And it's a 50-50 grant. So it's requires a 50% match from the city. 2.7 is what is already allocated and appropriated to this project in our CIP. And basically what we would have to do in order for us to provide the local match to the new project total of 3.9 million is we would also have to increase our 50% local match, right? So we would need to delay the start of 2 other fiscal year 25 projects that are in the CIP right now that are also funded by RevShare, because all of that local money to make up 50% of that 3.9, it's already in the CIP, it's already appropriated, it's just in other projects right now. So what we're proposing is that we would delay the start by 1 year of these 2 other projects. Those projects are the intersection, the traffic signal and intersection improvement projects at Broad and Spring and Hillwood and Annandale. We would delay that start. They are in fiscal year 25, so they're starting this year, but we would delay that to fiscal year 26, which realistically, they would probably be starting towards the very end of fiscal year 25 as it stands right now. But we would push out the funding and the project schedules of those 2 to start in fiscal year 26. We would borrow the 1.3, we're solving for a $1.3 million local need, right? So we would borrow that $1.3 million in local money from those projects. And so the only impact would be the $330,000 additional that we need. But we would borrow it from those 2 projects, push those 2 projects 1 year out. That has impacts in the out years, fiscal years 27 through 29, we would have to pay back that $1.3 million. So that creates, you know, a need in the out year, starting in fiscal year 27. So, and that's when we would pay back that would be an increase of $1.3 million of local money in the CIP in fiscal years 27, 28, and 29. Most of it is in 27. That also assumes, I think that's another assumption, that nothing will change between now and fiscal year 27, which some things could change between now and then in our CIP funding scenario and in our plans and in our budget. But that's the current scenario and the impacts and the current outlook that I wanted to outline for you all tonight.
Thanks. Thank you, Caitlin. I should say that the ineligible sidewalk funding, it's ineligible because of the fact that it doesn't front the project. So there are at least two places that this happens. One is a connection from Great Falls, from Lincoln Avenue to the W&OD Trail along Great Falls is one of the areas. And another area is Yucatan, where there's a sidewalk that's just 50 feet away from where we're working, that we want to make that connection. So those are instances of ineligible sidewalk funds. And no, can you advance that? Or is it? Is that the end? There you go. Okay. So our next steps on this include the design phase, receipt of 60% plans in October. Right now we're sitting at about 50%, plus or minus, receipt of 90% plans in December. So you can see we're really fast tracking this. Thank you to Joe Arizzi, who's sitting in the cheap seats back here. He's the project manager for our consultant, Kimberly Horn. And then receipt of 100% plans and specifications in February of 2025. Our bid and award phase includes the bid phase starting in November of 2024. That's when Joe and my good friend Jan start working together in order to develop the construction documents. Project bid would be in March of 2025, and then project award would be in June of 2025, and that's when you would see this again to approve the construction contract. And then our construction would start in July of 2025 and end in August of 2026. That is only September, October, November, December, 4 months shy of when we have to have this money spent. We have to have it spent by December 31st, 2026, or we lose it. It's cut and dry, simple as that. So with that, what I'll do is we do say questions, but what I want to do is I want to run real quickly through what our existing plan entails, specifically the roadway, the sidewalk, and the storm drainage. You guys have copies of this. You can follow along if you would like, but this is another place I have to get up. I apologize. And I'm sorry, my voice was much better when I started this project, but I've talked so much about it. I think if you guys that remember the first public meeting, I was talking a whole lot clearer and had a lot more breath, and for some reason I don't have it anymore, but we'll see how it works. And less gray hair, right? You're right. Yeah, I had to shave my beard off so I didn't look 65 when I went in. Not that there's anything wrong with 65. Thank you. As you can see here, here's the West Street here. Spring Street is here. You can see we've enlarged these sidewalks here to about 6 feet in width. For those of you that are looking at this sheet, that faint red line indicates the existing curb and gutter. So you know where the existing limit of the sidewalk and roadway are right now. You can see we do have to come into the driveway some, and those would just be temporary construction easements in order to fix the grades between the sidewalk, the new sidewalk, and the existing driveways. Some of the driveways, actually, from what I understand, people bottom out on now, so a lot of those will be able to fix as a part of this project and get brand new driveways. We do allow parking on the north side of the street up until about this point here. There's parking here as well. 915 is where we have the worst case of flooding in this particular area here. And I'm proud to say that our first choice was to go this way with the water, but now we're going to be able to come back this way with it and also fix what we call spread problems in the road. Spread is the distance that the water comes out of the gutter during a storm event, and it inhibits the flow of traffic, and we're able to resolve those back to our current today's standards. None of the road is based on today's standards right now. All right, go to the next one. Here you see we're continuing. Notice we've come outside of the poles here, the existing poles. We're not able to move those poles because, and I said this at one of the block meetings, I'm like, raise up hands on who wants to give me an easement to put poles in there further in their yard. I got no takers from that. But we were able to move this out essentially, and we do have parking along this area here. And we have more green spaces, what you see in this area. We're going to be looking at the crosswalks in this area. These are not quite settled yet. We still have to look at sight distances and things like that. Our engineers are looking at that now. Our internal engineers are looking at that now. If you can see where we do have crosswalks here and here scheduled, and those will be raised crosswalks, so they'll act as kind of like a hump as you're going through. You can go next one. Down here, we get into, let's see, okay. We'll talk about the American Legion here in a minute, a little later on, but you can see what's going on here is we've eliminated the parking in this area. Some of these houses front on the street, some don't, but these areas here will be left as low areas, as kind of like a last resort for flooding before it floods people's crawl spaces and yards in this particular instance. We'll have crosswalks here at Greenwich, not shown, but and also a crosswalk here. In areas where we go for long distances without crosswalks, we will install speed tables that take the place of crosswalks that we've eliminated. Here in the park, we'll do some underground detention in this area here. Also, we will install some underground storage areas in this vicinity, as well as bioretention, in order to eliminate some of the ponding that we see currently in the park. Here you see that we've moved the sidewalks out into the street because, again, we wanted to narrow the roadway. Because why? Because that calms traffic. That reduces speeds in the area. If we go to the next slide, the big thing here is scroll down, is the intersection. So we have made some changes to the intersection. We did some analysis of the traffic there, as far as traffic count, as far as signal studies, and we found that what we would do is maintain a straight and left turn only lane on these three quadrants, but we would just leave the straight left as a single lane on the going north. We also would maintain or create islands here for two reasons. One, it allows for a right turn lane, and also it shortens the crosswalk so that you don't have as far to walk across. There's a refuge, you could say, for pedestrians as they come across. As we get further down, you see where we do some bioretention here in front of 508, and we also do some permeable pavement in these areas here. And again, you can see where the existing curb is, so we have narrowed the road quite a bit in these areas. We can go to the next one because I want you to have time for questions. Go down a little bit. So the same treatment here. We've moved the poles to behind the sidewalk. We narrow the road physically here, and it is narrowed in these locations as well. Right now there's a median that goes down, or a painted median that goes down the middle of the street there. So we reduced the lanes to 11 feet, reduced the parking down to 7 feet, and then also given a visual narrowing through here with both concrete liners and permeable pavement. Again, you can see here that we've done the same thing. We've physically narrowed the road here at Walden Court. But this was an area where we also had a lot of flooding in this area. So you can see some of the stormwater improvements that we make in these areas in order to alleviate that problem. You can go to the next one. And this is the end of the project where, again, we moved the curb and gutter out. This is one of the areas where we'll be connecting the existing sidewalk, which is right about here, to this sidewalk here, creating more green space, narrowing the road as soon as you come into the city. Can you go to the next one, please, Sophie? This is some of the work that we have planned for the American Legion. We're still negotiating, but one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to build a bioretention basin in this area here. Remember, this is the area where I said we were creating low spaces behind the curb in order to help with the flooding in this area. And we also want to plan a detention basin, underground detention basin in the American Legion's parking lot. At first, we thought about doing it in this area here, but this seemed to be the more sensible place to put it. We will be tearing down this house here in order to allow for this pipe. For those of you that don't know, that house is currently condemned. The back half of it is actually missing right now. So helping the Legion with this particular issue while they help us with another issue, essentially, is the best way to put it. I think that's owned by, yes. This property here and this property, all of this and this is owned by the Legion. And if you've never been in the Legion, you need to get an invite because it's pretty fancy in there, I have to say. So that's about it as far as the project is concerned. Again, detention.
So I think you got one more with the Lincoln Park.
Oh, okay, yeah. So we kind of saw this before, but we have an existing basketball court here. We're going to be using that as underground detention. We're also going to be doing a little bit better drainage components here. This sidewalk, we're moving this crosswalk because this driveway kind of backs into this crosswalk here. So we want to move it. And the reason we like this is because there's a big energy facility right here. There's an underground power station, essentially, that it's underground, but you can see it. It's a green box. It stands about this high, about this wide. No way do we want to move that. So we move the fence down, the gate to the park down to this area here, and install a sidewalk here where currently there is no sidewalk. So we feel like that'll be a big improvement to the area to have sidewalk. And we maintain parking in this area along the park itself. So that does it as far as, that was a quick run through. You guys have the plan in front of you. So with that, I'd like to open it up to any questions.
Great. Well, first of all, Tony, thank you. I mean, when I think about the objectives between stormwater, green space, accessibility, traffic, pedestrian safety, these are like all the top priorities we regularly hear from everybody. It's really hard to get any one of those perfect, but to try to balance all of them is really an art. So thank you for all the hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the detailed block meetings, the briefings, and then the comment response matrix. I read through every single one of them and most of the emails. I think it's just really impressive how specific and detailed and responsive you've been to everybody and trying to incorporate all that. So I wanted to give you kudos for that. I actually had a neighbor at a neighborhood party. Someone unsolicited gave me feedback about how much they appreciated the outreach you had done to the neighbors. And so that came unsolicited, so I wanted to make sure you heard that. And then the second, actually, before I open up for questions, is actually kudos to Justine. I know she's put in a ton of work in meeting neighbors where they are and hearing feedback, and I think that detailed outreach really does make a difference. So kudos to both of you. So with that, questions and comments? I'll start with Justine, who knows probably more about this than any of us.
I just want to second Letty's comments. Thank you for meeting people where they are and actually walking the street with people. I've seen you out there many, many times. I do remember when you first started this project, you mentioned that you had another project in DC that was incredibly difficult. And so you're entering this with, I guess, some confidence. But I also wonder if now that we're 50% of the way through this, like maybe this project's actually even more difficult than the one you did when we have such a deeply engaged and involved population, probably more so than anywhere else in the country, I might say. I think about this project, as almost like a piece of dough where you can like stretch it towards stormwater and maybe that takes away some parking, or we can stretch it towards tree and maybe that takes away some sidewalk, or, there's so many different, and then money is actually the biggest thing. It's like, which direction can you stretch it in? And so, before I get too much further, I do want to disclose that I live in this neighborhood. I am not directly on Lincoln, so I'm not directly impacted, but a lot of the people that I've been interacting with are my neighbors. So thinking about all these considerations, I have a list of 12 questions that are medium hard, and then 4 questions that are hard that I'd like to go through. And then there are probably more, but I can also follow up afterwards. But I'll try to go through as quickly as possible. So with these plans, there's stretches of green, and it says that that's landscaping. Can you talk a little bit about like what the green represents? Because sometimes, especially like if you go to the 900 block, it looks like the green goes onto people's properties. Mm-hmm. And so is that suddenly the city taking over landscaping for resident? Like what does that green mean, especially when it goes onto a property?
It just means new open space. The idea there being that if we add on to someone's front yard, then it would just undergo normal maintenance like they do now. Right, so it wouldn't mean that the city is taking over landscaping. We may be able to plant some things there for residents as a part of the planting plan. We have to be careful though, because on the south side of the street is where all of the power poles are. So we can't plant any like big trees or anything like that, but there may be room for planting in some of those areas.
Okay, so I guess like I will give the example of 917,
Mm-hmm.
when it does show, and actually maybe we can pull this up. It's, I think, the first page on the that document. Yeah, so all the way very close to
Yes, the number one.
number one. So right there you have like you have a little bit of green that goes onto the property. That's not actually.
Just means there's no perviousness there. There's no impervious there. Excuse me.
There.
Right.
Okay, but they can,
do what they like.
Yeah.
And actually, in that area, we're staying outside her erected fence. So, it'll be. She has a natural area there now that she's been pretty adamant about keeping. So we've been able to maintain that.
Is there maintenance built into some of the expected costs of this project? So things like what you were showing in DC, where there are plants and other things like that, is a city prepared to maintain these basins?
Unfortunately, we have not put any maintenance cost into the cost that you see there. Mm-hmm. And in order to, if council is going to prioritize things like pervious pavement and green infrastructure, there is maintenance costs that go along with that. And so DPW staff leadership will bring forward those types of things, because we won't be able to keep a zero-sum gain on our maintenance as we have it today. We'll have to see some increase. And it's not like we don't do any of that today. We have BMPs and like, for example, over on Westmoreland, just off of Trips Run, where we maintain the detention basin. Mm-hmm. So there will be some increase in costs, but that is kind of what comes along with water quality components and green infrastructure.
Okay, well, I guess I would care about making sure that we get that on DPW's docket, so that it's not like we do this project and then suddenly 5 years down the road, we have to maintain it or do whatever else.
Yeah.
So just as long as that's on council's radar for budgets and DPW's radar. So then actually going down on this page at 921, it does look like the sidewalk goes onto their property. Is that the case? Is any of that down there going to go onto people's property?
Honestly, council member, that area is kind of in flux right now because of the fact that we don't currently have sidewalk right away down that area. We have a sidewalk. It's not, but it's not ADA compliant. But there's no right of way there at the moment. So
As in that's all their
that is their
owner's
property.
okay. So that would be something where you'd have to work with them.
Yes, we'll tie into the existing sidewalk. But yeah, we'll have to do some work there from a right of way standpoint in order to make that happen.
Okay, and so I guess
Otherwise, we can find a place to kind of cut the project off before then, so that we don't impact that area.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so that is one area that's kind of in flux depending on the right of way, and depending on working with the homeowners there. Okay.
We do, though, I should say, from a traffic standpoint, we are planning to do a no right turn on red at that intersection.
Perfect. Okay, that answers the next question, so thank you.
Okay.
Let me just make sure I'm not missing anything. Is that crosswalk there, would that be a raised crosswalk?
Yes.
That would
And
be
it
a raised
would, not the crosswalk that you see to the left, but the one to the
west.
right. Yeah, the one,
The one crossing
yes.
Lincoln?
Yeah, the straight one.
Straight one is, okay, perfect.
That would be a raised crosswalk, yes.
Okay. Let me see. If residents so desired, what would be the pathway for permitted parking on Lincoln? I'm going to throw that to Wyatt. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Permanent.
Yeah,
Permitted.
Permitted. So some residents were asking to plant the seed, so they were wondering what would be the process.
We would assign that to a staff member who would work with the neighborhood. There is a petition process where we need to have an indication of a majority of the residents would want that. And so that also then would prompt a parking utilization study. And so the combination of the data of the parking utilization study and the petition from the residents ultimately then feeds into a decision. We do have a couple of zone parking areas in the city. Generally, they've been around new mixed-use development. That's where we've implemented those in recent years.
Okay. So there is that would be the pathway here as well.
That's right.
Okay, great, thank you. Let me see. Are all crosswalks on Lincoln right now, they're raised crosswalks?
Not now, no.
Oh, excuse me, not now, but now in the plans?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And then are the intersections that, like, let's say the Great Falls intersection and what else do we have? Spring Street or Oak Street? So the crossing streets also have raised crosswalks?
Yes.
Okay. And are any crosswalks that are in the plan right now? Because you'd mentioned that there had been maybe a crosswalk that went to nowhere. There aren't any crosswalks in the plan now that you see
if you go
going
to the
away.
second page. Yes, an example with that would be Spring Street. Just slide down a minute. So let's see, Spring, is that Spring? No, I'll go back one page.
There we go.
All right. It was on there. Okay. So here you can see where at first we had crosswalks that went across the street from the Spring side to the other side of the street. But of course, there's no sidewalk over there to go to, right? So in these instances, what we're suggesting is that we put in raised speed tables in these areas to make up for the lack of for a crosswalk in this. So again, we're slowing the traffic down. But again, there would be no crosswalk there.
And so that would be the main, I guess we don't have, that would be the main area where we would have speed tables.
Yeah.
Okay, but nothing on the east side, just mostly right here.
Well, on the east side, most of the crosswalks go somewhere over there.
Yeah.
So that's where we would have the raised crosswalks.
Right, but no speed tables on that side.
We don't have any plan, but I probably will talk to the traffic engineers to see, because they have to review this project as well. We're kind of in that review project. But we'll see if there may be one or two needed over there where we have long stretches that need to be.
Gotcha, okay. So that's, I guess, we're only at 50%, so that's something in flux as we go along, okay. Right now, the speed limit's planned for 20 miles an hour.
We're planning for 20 miles an hour, yes.
And then
It's currently 25.
25, okay. Another question I got about rapid flashing beacons. Do any of these intersections have rapid flashing beacons?
Currently, there are no rapid flashing beacons planned, but honestly, I would like to see one at Oak Street, like a flashing red, flashing stop sign. If you're not familiar with these, they're just a stop sign that have lights around the stop sign itself that kind of promote the stop sign a little bit better.
So it wouldn't be something where you push a button and it flashes light. It would be something that's
Continuously flashing.
that would, I mean, I don't know. I have no idea what the costs are, but that would probably add some expense.
It
to
would
those
add some
projects.
expense, yes.
Okay, so that would be the.
I just want to add about the rapid flashing beacon. If we did add that here, that if we used grant funds for that, it would require a traffic study, like a traffic warrant study to justify the rapid flashing beacon. That's something that we've actually had a hard time justifying in the past. We had a hard time justifying it across South Washington. So I would imagine that we would also have a hard time getting a warrant to justify that across Lincoln. I just want to say that for the public record.
That's helpful to know all the different considerations that go into that. In terms of trees, do you know, like, where are trees being removed and where are trees being planted? Do we have that information yet?
We don't know where trees are going to be planted yet. We do have some idea of where they will be removed. There's only one tree that we're planning to remove by the park, and we're putting a sidewalk in its place. The tree actually is in the way of people walking down the street, I mean, or through that area, and there's no sidewalk there now, but we'd like to see one there, of course. That's one tree that would be removed. We got some pushback. We had planned a sidewalk for the, if you can go, flash through pages, go to the intersection, the Great Fall intersection with the park on it. Let's see, hold on, one more. There we go. Here we go. That's good. So you see where it says prop 7-foot sidewalk, proposed 7-foot sidewalk? There's a tree right there that is outside of the park limit. That's one for sure that we know we'll be removing. Another tree that we'll be removing is the one that you saw, the manhole going around. And there's a few more off the corridor where trees love to grow over corrugated metal pipes for some reason. They get their nourishment from the water and everything else, and they usually straddle the pipe. But the problem is those pipes are 60, 70 years old, and when they go, the tree goes with them. I mean, you know, be it windstorm or what have you. And so it behooves us to remove some of these old trees because they're not healthy where they're sitting. But in other instances, if you scroll to the right, we'll go one more page over if you don't mind. And then scroll down. All right, so in one instance, well, let's see, did we go to, oh, sorry, that might have been too far. There are some trees. We had proposed a sidewalk for the east side of Great Falls, south of Lincoln. Okay, and there was some feedback saying, "Hey, you've got some trees down there that you would be." Yeah, that's it. If you scroll down, yeah. So you see, I'm not going to get up. So just in the middle of that page, you zoom back out again and go down. Yeah, there you go. That's good. That's good. So you see the sidewalk that we had planned for the east side of Great Falls, south of Lincoln, headed towards the W&OD. There are several older trees down that area that would have been impacted by that sidewalk. But also in the way down there are some utilities that we want to miss. And so instead of putting the sidewalk there, we're going to cross the street and we're going to put the sidewalk on the other side of the street where there's an existing sidewalk, and then we'll improve that sidewalk so that it meets ProWag, and that will serve as a way to get to the W&OD from there. So we will be eliminating what you see as sidewalk on the east side there.
Yeah, okay, so for that specific area, I mean, I guess we talk about this piece of dough that we're pulling on. Right now, I mean, so these plans show a sidewalk on the east side, but that sidewalk would be removed.
That's correct. Well, it's not there. There's no sidewalk there now.
So it would be removed from the plans that we
Yeah.
have, okay. So then, and the main reasons for that would be for for trees, for tree canopy, and for
Utilities.
And then also, does that save money on the project too?
Well, not really, because we have to redo the sidewalk on the other side. The sidewalk on the west side there suffers from the same problems as the side, so there would have to be a brand new sidewalk there. But it would save some money in the fact that I wouldn't have to remove any trees, which those trees are expensive. And I'll tell everybody that it's not my first choice to remove trees because it costs a lot of money. I mean, we're talking $8,000 to $10,000 a tree to remove those types of trees. So we wouldn't have to remove any trees. We wouldn't have to deal with any utilities. So yes, the answer is yes, it would be cheaper.
Yeah, it would be cheaper to,
Build the sidewalk on the other side.
okay, so that is, so one part of the poll is money too. I did hear from a few neighbors that they did want that sidewalk in there. But I think going back to what I will do is go back to the community and mention all these different trade-offs, and also this is something that we should discuss. Do we want the sidewalk or not? Is that actually even something that's up for consideration right now? Is whether or not to keep that sidewalk, or is that pretty much
It's a done deal.
done deal?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's no, that's not like, I appreciated in your comment matrix, you said like what was up for consideration and what wasn't. And so that sidewalk is out of the question.
That one you see there, yes, is out of the
Out of
question.
the question now, okay. So then I'm also wondering, going to the 700 block, so I think if we go up, a bit on
Back
these
a page or
plans.
two.
Yeah. Right, I think it's,
Scroll down.
yeah, this is good enough. So I guess what I'm wondering is, again, this gets to the green landscaping. Where the sidewalk is that as close to the property line as you can get? Or is there a green buffer between the sidewalk and people's property, such that you could put the green buffer on the other side of the sidewalk?
Okay, so we've talked about that internally. And the problem that we get into is sometimes that area is only a foot wide. Okay. In other areas, it's more, but in a lot of areas, it's not a lot. And I honestly don't see being able to maintain or even grow anything in an area that small. So just like the reason we didn't put any medians in the middle of the street, right? We pushed all that to the side so that, so that people could maintain it themselves and not necessarily have this dead patch of dirt that's growing between the sidewalk and the street.
Okay, so there is in some cases, there is a little bit of space.
Some cases there's a little bit of space. There's a bit more. Generally, we put the poles in that area, though.
Okay. Would the space where the Legion is, I guess, let me just see, can the sidewalk run behind the utility pole away from the road, since the city's turning that property into a stormwater management?
I agree to that. The house on the corner there does not have any off-street parking, so we agreed to have parking in that one area.
Oh, so towards
With 7-Eleven.
towards 7-Eleven.
7-Eleven, 7-12, 7-13 maybe?
I guess, let me pull this up on my, end.
713, yeah.
So I guess, yeah, so right where 7-Eleven is, and that utility pole is, it wouldn't be possible to move the sidewalk to the other side of the utility pole there.
Yeah. I think anything is possible, but there's also a need to have, so you can see the parking that we kept in front of 713. What we did, we also have a need for maintenance vehicles in that area as well. So we were trying to put in as much parking as we possibly could. To move the pole, we put that pole outbound of the, we also have to impact 709 as well.
Okay.
So again, yeah, we do have access to the 7-Eleven property, but 709, like I said, I'm trying to stay out of people's front yards.
Gotcha. What about, so I guess and then the final utility pole at 305 Lincoln, so this is all the way on the edge of the city. That's, I guess, the one place where we didn't add ADA compliance. Is that something where we could, so that would be the last page? Yeah.
Almost last
Or,
page.
excuse me, third to last page. So it's the very
Yeah,
end of
just,
the,
yeah, keep going down that way.
there we go.
Right. One more maybe.
Oh, one more. Yeah, here. So you've had our project, and I guess ends before that final utility pole.
That one down, to the right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it ends, yeah.
So I guess this would be an expense, I guess being able to put some sort of sidewalk or ADA accessible route around that.
I mean, it would add to the project.
Add to
I
the project
mean,
cost. Is that, and so this is, on your matrix, what was in purple was things that are up for consideration. If there is money for that, is that up for consideration, or is that completely out of bounds?
well, I think it's completely out of bounds. We do want to maintain parking in that area. I got a big, I don't think we necessarily would have to take it, but the other thing was encroaching into that natural area was also a big no-no as far as the residents in the 300 block was concerned.
Okay. So I guess,
So you have to stay behind, so you'd have to come down to the south there quite a bit. And so then you'd have to increase the sidewalk width, and you would be encroaching into that natural area there.
I see, okay. Okay, so then, now going to my last 4 questions. I
Okay.
promise I'll wrap up soon. Going into the 600 block near Lincoln Park, are there, so that would be,
Are these hard questions?
what?
Are these hard questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
We've graduated to the hard question.
Yeah, these are the hard questions. Yeah, this is the last 4, and they're the hard ones. Yeah, so this 600 block Lincoln area. I guess, is there any way, let's say if that crosswalk were moved, I know you gave very good reasons for why the crosswalk's where it is. If it were put back, would there be a way to change the sidewalk to go around the utility area, such that maybe it does go into the park a little bit? But that would be a way to both add parking and keep the crosswalk.
All right, so you have the issue of the property there beside the park backing into that crosswalk, essentially. That was one of the main drivers behind moving that.
Oh.
Was that we didn't have that particular we didn't have that conflict, essentially.
Okay.
And you talk about the balances. So, I mean, that was brought to us by that property owner. I have to watch people as I'm backing into the road. So moving that and then moving it that far is to get it behind the utility, essentially. It's to get it to the other side of the utility.
Okay, so you don't see any sort of, I don't know if the word is compromise here, but you pretty much see like that's where that crosswalk would need to go.
That's how I see it, yeah.
Okay. Are there, in terms of parking for the park, I do know that there are parking spaces on Great Falls, but oftentimes they're not utilized because it's not obvious. I mean, this is where I don't know how wide this project can extend, but if there is some way to make the parking spots on Great Falls more obvious, that would be a way to sort of increase parking in a sort of in a way that hopefully like adds, makes it easier for people to access parking, especially in an area where there's so much parking that is getting removed right now.
I mean, it is. I think it's beyond the scope of this particular project.
Okay.
But you can see that there's parking in front of the park right now. I mean, or right adjacent to the park right now.
And so in that specific area, do you see any simple, what are the, as long as we're talking about the dough, what are the trade-offs? And do you see any simple way of adding parking back in there?
Honestly, I don't. The right-of-way lines that are shown there are not correct. The right-of-way lines that you see there are pretty much right at the edge of people's existing property right now, right? That was one of the very first meetings I went to from a group standpoint to talk about what was going on there. And at first, what we did was we eliminated the turn lane in order to keep the parking. But that meant that the sidewalk also encroached into the 601, 603, 605, 607 yards. Matthew Raz was one of the first people to come in, and he did some drawings to show, hey, this is how much it impacts my property. You're going to take my walls, and you're going to take that guy's walls, and that guy's walls, and that guy's walls. And at the time, we didn't know exactly where the right-of-way was, but then we found out that the right-of-way is right at the walls. I mean, so the right-of-way narrows in that area, right? So there's no city property there. And the quote that I remember was, "Use your property, not mine." Okay, and that meant use the street to do your work, not my property, not up into my yard. Right, and so I took that at face value, because the sidewalk was going to come into his front yard quite a bit, and again, a couple of the neighbors there said, if I have to choose between my property, my wall, and the parking, I choose my wall. And so of the four or five people that were there, if four of them were saying that, then in my mind, that's consensus, because I'm not going to be able to please everybody all the time. So that's what I did. I stayed out of their property, away from their wall, and I gave their walls a wide berth to make sure that even my construction would not encroach on their walls. And again, that was one of the very first property owner meetings I had out there. And it got a little contentious, I must say. But I did what they asked. And not only that, but they told me that if I eliminated that turn lane, then I was going to have cars backed up down the street. So what did I do? I didn't eliminate the turn lane. I left the turn lane there. I found the justification to leave it there. And so that's kind of, that area is very tight down there. And in order to meet all of the goals here, that was the decision that I made. Buck stops here from a project management standpoint, because a lot of times I'm the guy having to make those decisions and then justify them later on. And so that's the decision I made.
In terms of, I guess, actually staying here, a lot of these crosswalks are narrowed, or like they come to what I would consider pinch points. Has there been talk about putting more of a pinch point there? You have the crosswalk, but it doesn't narrow to the
We have the island there, the refuge.
The mid-block crosswalk, I meant.
Eliminating the mid,
Not eliminating, I'm saying, narrowing that space as you have parking there, but obviously not parking at the crosswalk.
At the crosswalk itself.
Extension. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure I follow.
Yeah, it would be a bump out at the crosswalk. So this was another piece of
Oh,
feedback that I got.
I mean, yeah, it could be done. I mean, I don't know if it's 100% necessary, but yeah, I mean, because we're pretty narrow down through there already, so.
But I guess in terms of, in some ways, because you do have the parking lane on towards near the park, and so there could be something.
Yeah, it could be,
that's
yeah.
there. Okay.
Yeah, and we can look at that.
Okay. In terms of, I am curious in terms of cost, because I have no idea, the scope of this stuff. Are bump outs more expensive than regular pavement?
Yeah.
They are. Okay. So
More forming, concrete, fill. I mean, they end up being a little bit more,
Okay.
a little bit more expensive. Yeah.
Because one of the other comments was asking about Oak and Greenwich Street. So it would be on the northeast side of Oak and Greenwich Street.
Yeah, we're going to take. I've seen that comment. We're going to take a look at that.
Okay.
We're going to definitely take a look at that to see if that's
possible.
The only issue that we have is stormwater and drainage there.
Okay.
I don't want to necessarily create a bump out that traps stormwater. That's because that stormwater comes down that street, right? So we have to put some type of catch basin in there in order to handle it. And I just need to make sure that the catch basin that we put in there doesn't have to be so big because of water coming around that thing and then coming out into the street and messing up our spread.
Gotcha. Okay. And then I think we're almost done. In terms of how narrow are the pinch points? Do they come down to
22 feet.
22 feet. So what I was asked was, is it possible to get them, some of them to be more narrow? Specifically because I guess Zach, but before Zach left, had said that even for buses and snowplows, it's okay to have pinch points that are more narrow, as long as they're only in like one place or two places.
It's the emergency vehicles that we talk about at that point in time. Emergency vehicles needing or being more comfortable with 11-foot lanes, but that's about as narrow as the fire trucks and the fire engineers like to see. So
Okay.
that's why we were sticking with 22 feet as a minimum there.
Okay. I know I've taken up a ton of time, so any other remaining questions I will follow up offline, but hopefully I took away some of your guys' questions too. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And I will follow up soon.
I do feel like I'm in front of Congress.
We look a little different than Congress.
Okay.
Who's next? Who else has comments?
I can go pretty quickly.
Great.
Thank you again. I, recognize all the work that's gone into this and all the meetings that's gone into this. And we've seen, so much of the public comment. So really do appreciate the time and effort that you've put into it and, the telephone calls and then the thinking and the internal discussion. And so I know it's been a lot. And I think from my perspective, it's for people who have provided comments, I appreciate, seeing all of them. But I just want to ensure at this point that really you have processed them, that you have, given lots of consideration to them, as you've said, to the extent that you are, deciding not to implement something that someone has suggested, that there's, justifiable basis for doing so, and that we're at the point that if people, continue to feel strongly about issues, that you, are open to hearing that in order to help understand, why it is it's such a sticking point and whether, their particular issue is borne out by, their lived experience in the street for however long the period of time is. But I'm not, going to kind of get into the individual comments to the degree as much as kind of just overall appreciation, because I know a lot has gone into this, but at the same time, like, it's a very large investment. It's now at
Almost $12 million,
$11.5 million, so we want to make sure that we also do it right. On the budget piece of things, so just to kind of clarify, we're talking about the 330,000 that you would need as an additional infusion of local dollars. But basically what you're talking about is floating 1.3 million from elsewhere in the CIP into this project. So we're talking at like basically finding $1.6 million and slowing sort of, it looked to be the maybe Hawk or West Broad and Spring, and then also the Hillwood and Annandale. And I put that out there because, you know, they're also important points, right, in the city for pedestrian safety and places that we hear about a lot. And so I guess I want to avoid like surprises where we see a CIP and then the next thing there's like $1.3 million that's unaccounted for, even though there was, you know, X amount reflected in the CIP for Lincoln Avenue, like roadbed reconstruction and whatever else. So I guess in terms of like the additional cost, are we seeing it X months after approving the CIP and budget just because the scope of the project has changed? Or can you just kind of shed a little bit more light on that?
Yes, I'll do my best. Yes, so the project scope changed. We added scope to the roadbed. It was just a full depth roadbed reconstruction and paving. We added a lot of sidewalk work. And I don't remember when it was, you do, I'm sure, but one of the times that Tony presented at council, he was asked, what would it cost to include all the sidewalk that we want to include and that the community it wants? And it was the difference between 8 million and 11.5 million. So that's what that's what we've tried to include in this project, and it really helped us out that we had the PROAG that, that now is a federal guideline that we have to do a lot of that ADA and pedestrian accessibility work. So yeah, the increase is the difference between, and I can't remember now if it's 1.3 or 1.6, but it's the difference between the 2.7, it's 1.2.5, basically. That's the increase to the project cost, that's sort of project subtotal cost for the roadbed reconstruction and sidewalk work. So we are increasing that above and beyond what it was originally. That money is already all appropriated in our fiscal year 25 CIP. So we have that money, the local match. But we're moving it all, we're shifting it all to Greening of Lincoln and to the roadbed reconstruction project, as long as we get approval from VDOT and they put up the other half, right? By doing that, we obviously have to delay the schedules a little bit of the other two projects. I want to clarify that those two projects are not at 50% design right now. They're nowhere near that. We haven't even issued POs for the design of those two projects. We just received funding for the first time in July of this year. So that is very, very early conceptual phase of those two projects. What we will get done between now and July of next year, we can still do a lot of it without any funding. We can do our homework and we can sort of queue it up so that we're ready to go July of next year if we go with this proposed, scenario. But what we will actually get done realistically between now and July with the funding that we have is not a ton, right? I feel like, Greening of Lincoln is a priority right now because we are halfway through the design and we have the time constraints that we have, right? Remind me what the rest of your question was.
That's fine. That's a satisfactory answer. I was just saying I didn't want to lose, like, we're putting 330,000 into it.
Yes.
We're really injecting like 1.6 or so into it between the 1.25, the 330, and we're going to need to come up with 1.3 from elsewhere at a certain point in time to backfill where we're moving this from, even though those were CIP appropriated. So I guess for purposes of surplus and budget amendment and budget discussions, I want those things to be reflected somewhere, since they're now costs that we need to make up for.
If we go forward with the proposed scenario here, it would definitely be reflected in the fiscal year 26 CIP. I mean, it would change the whole 6-year plan for transportation, really, for these different programs of traffic signals and paving. One thing that Andy and I talked through when we were looking at this is that, yes, if you wanted to keep the funding as is for the other two projects, the way it is right now, if you wanted to keep it that, yes, the request in fiscal year 25 in your budget amendment would be 1.6 million instead of 330,000. We felt that 330,000 was better at this time, because really that 1.3 will not be needed because of the funding that we have appropriated in fiscal year 25 and 26, and because of the project schedules. That funding will not be needed until, starting in FY 27, we will need about 1.1 additional local money than what we have programmed right now. And then in 28 and 29, it's like 2,000 in 28, and then it's like 200,000 in 29. So that's the 1.3 over those 3 years. Again, that assumes that we don't change anything in the whole 6-year program that we have planned right now.
Okay. On the 900,000 for the right-of-way acquisition, are you pretty confident, based on where you are now, with what the plans look like, that you can do the right-of-way acquisition you need for
I'm hoping
$1 million?
it'll be cheaper.
Okay.
Honestly, I think that, we're still looking at the whole issue concerning federal procurement and things like that. But, locally, when we're working on a project, for example, with the Legion, we would ask for a donated easement in that instance, right? And, I think it's like a $10 thing, because the property owner's getting something out of it, we're getting something out of it. So I'm hoping that we don't have to spend that kind of money. A lot of the $400,000 is really in developing the cost to do it, right? So a lot of that is professional services, essentially, going out, getting appraisals and doing that kind of work. We've been able to lower that cost, because it could have potentially been more if we were doing like full appraisals and things like that. But we don't think we have to do full appraisals. We can just base it off of the appraised value of the property, and they're temporary construction easement, so very little permanent easement. So those things only come in at around $200 or $300, a property. So.
Okay. And then for all these numbers, right, we normally see, for example, the 40% contingency that's built into this. So when we're talking about, the funding amounts that we have and the totals that we're looking at, that's all built in.
Yes, 20%, 20% for the stormwater.
6.
Yeah,
Okay.
20% for the stormwater, 10% for the roadbed.
Okay. On stormwater, I guess I've raised in other contexts, when you do the stormwater analysis for this project and you're talking about, undersized pipes and the vaults and whatever else that we're going to be doing in different places at the Legion and Lincoln Park, is that based on current conditions as to pervious versus impervious coverage, or are you modeling it so that, let's say, this area is at 35% impervious coverage, and given the investment we're making, you're confident that like 35% impervious through this area with the vaults, even given current, pipes where you're not expanding them, that you are overall alleviating flooding issues that people are currently experiencing?
Yes. The first answer is we're basing it on existing conditions and existing land use. Okay. So the one thing that we do have in our back pocket that we didn't have previously, is that if anybody comes along and tries to put in like a McMansion or something like that, they're responsible for their stormwater management on their property. Okay, so they have to offset essentially that additional runoff, so we would not have to account for it. Whereas we didn't have that in the past, because no one had to do or manage their water on site. So now they have to manage their water on site, so we're safe, and we know that this area is not going to turn into like any really heavy commercial or anything like that.
I guess I would just ask for your, for your own purposes and planning and thinking about, these decisions on the vaults and everything else. I do think it might make sense to see like, what is the current impervious coverage? And then given the rate at which the tear downs are happening, and given the possibility of the accessory dwelling ordinance, that you might just want to kind of model out like what you think the current is versus what it could potentially max out as, and what you're talking about, the difference in the overall coverage. In terms of that, I agree on the no right on red for that northwest, so this is now the minor comment on this one, just as I go through my list. The no right on red going off west onto Lincoln, but still, I guess, given how inset that crosswalk is, the cars are gonna have the green on west and turn onto Lincoln when people have the right-of-way to cross as the pedestrian on Lincoln at that point, right? So I think the no right on red will solve some of the problems, but the right on green is still gonna potentially be a problem given the location of that like ADA accessible crosswalk now. So can you just look at it more closely?
Yeah.
Okay. And then on the Great Falls and Lincoln intersection, again, I trust, the traffic engineers, but at the same time, can you just give it a good hard look again on assuming drivers do not behave as you want them to behave, right? And that they're going to potentially cut out in lanes that they shouldn't be in based on where they should be going versus where they're trying to go, that you don't end up with like the lane shifts of the traffic coming, off 66 on Lincoln toward Founders Row, so to speak, with the oncoming traffic from Founders Row going toward the highway, that the left turning cars are facing the right turning lane, but they're really facing cars that are trying to go straight, that are dodging around the people who are waiting for the people to make left turns, but not actually waiting their turn to go straight, right? So like that where the lane shifts are happening, that we are actually
We
planning.
will be looking at changing the signaling at that intersection as well. So one thing that I'm proposing is that there only be one signal green at a time, so that and I still have to check with the transportation guys, but I would propose that we only let one part of the intersection go at a time, and that would eliminate people kind of coming into one another that are coming in at each other.
Okay. On the neighborhood concerns on things like, people currently park in parking lanes that are not abutting sidewalks, but there have been concerns about certain places where people will now be parking, and again, they're not next to a sidewalk, but they're also far away from a crosswalk. So do you share the concern? Do you have an answer to the concern? Do you have kind of like, where should those people go? The road is getting narrower, and you have people. It happens on Great Falls, right? When you park in the parking lane on Great Falls, there's no sidewalk, and you have to open your door immediately into kind of the oncoming traffic, and not everyone's getting out of the car on the house side of the lane, and so. Is it just like, be extra careful, or is there a way that you're going to try to direct those people to,
I think with a combination of narrowing the road and slowing people down that way, as well as the raised crosswalks and speed tables, that we would try to reduce the reduction in speed down through there, as well as more, and this is something that, because this project's gone through such a thorough review, the police have an opportunity to discuss this as well. And so talking about more enforcement through the corridor as well to slow people down would also be part of that. So we can't plan for everything, but certainly we can bring these other pieces that aren't necessarily engineering based, but just civic based, I guess you could say.
on the park, to the extent you're not taking, you don't need to take more of the mature trees down to do so, I would support trying to do a buffer to move the sidewalk in from the road, you know, given that we know we have so many little kids there and a lot of like toddler age kids there. And if you don't have cars parked at certain times, you know, those kids are closer to the road than you might otherwise want them to be. So especially there, if you can like wrap the sidewalk and have the buffer, something to consider.
Okay.
You know, again, just.
We
the-
do have 3 big trees sitting just inside the fence there.
Yeah.
And so, and we've had issues, people saying, hey, don't take these trees. And so I'm trying to draw that, you know,
No, I
thread
want the
that
little
needle.
kids to have the shade too. I don't want them out in
Right.
direct sunlight, you know, having issues, so. And then, last thing, I guess, do you feel like overall, where you started and where you ended, that you're happy with like how the aspects of all of this came through, and that you sort of feel like the overall, greening of Lincoln, like name still fits the project? Do you feel like it's kind of a misnomer and that it may be a little grayer than it was green to start with, or kind of do you feel like it's been true to the?
I personally feel it's been true. You know, when we first started this and first brought this to the public, you know, we eliminated all the parking on the north side of the road, everything, right? Because we had to have a place to start, right? So now we're kind of met that balance. Also, when we started this, we had a lot of pressure to include things like bike lanes, like full-blown bike lanes and things like that. And we've been able to avoid that as well, because, you know, that would have looked like a different project, honestly. I mean, we drew up concepts that would show, you know, bike lanes on both sides and things like that. And I once said, fastest way to say no to greening and Lincoln signs in the front yards is to go and have to encroach into people's yards by 20 feet or 30 feet in order to turn that out. And so we've been able to avoid those kinds of pressures as well, while also implementing, you know, slower speeds, sticking to our guns on narrowing the pavement. So I feel like we've done I think the compromise has worked out well in the project's favor.
Okay, well, thank you again, and at the end of the day, hopefully people feel, you know, their investments are better protected because we're dealing with, you know, the stormwater issues, that they feel safer, you know, on their streets overall. And so again, I appreciate all the work that's gone into it.
Thank
And wish you luck in our shared interest of moving this forward and keeping it on schedule so that we can get all this money spent by the time that, you know, we need to for the grant funding to help us with almost 50% of the cost, right? ARPA funds. Thanks.
Okay, that was a lot of questions so far, so who's got more comments? It's not covered. Dave?
So what happens next? I'm looking at the schedule on the back. So does that mean you go forward after tonight, or what's the next step?
Well, we'll say, you know, in our original schedule that we laid out for council, we had a May timeframe for really wrapping up the design at the 60% level. And we've been working with the neighborhood longer than we originally planned. So let me turn it back over to our project manager to walk through next steps.
Originally, when we first came to you guys with this project, the money had to be obligated by the end of this year, okay? Right after, not days after we talked to you guys about this, the $4 million that we're getting from the state, right, is ARPA money. And they, in the act of us signing our agreement, that made up for that obligation time frame. So we don't have to have, none of the money that you see up there right now has to be obligated by the end of this year, okay? So that gave us time to work a lot closer with the community on the project. So our next steps coming from tonight is that my friend Joe will go heads down on the project and complete the plans. And we will go through our normal CIP run of starting the right-of-way scenario. We'll get that started. That can kind of run hand in hand with what he's doing. And then hopefully by December, we're sitting at 90% plans that we can look to bid in March. So really, those are the next steps. Just the heavy-handed engineering that has to go in to getting all of our profiles and all of our stormwater discharges and everything else straight.
So I want to thank you for a very complicated but very interesting project that does achieve a lot of critical objectives. I think the question is it clear to the community what remaining input is possible and when? I mean, do you feel after tonight this is a go and that?
I do.
I mean, I'm just trying to figure out procedurally so that the public has a clear understanding of where this project goes now. So if people might have comments, and again, I think you've done a fantastic job working through these comments. Thank you, Council Member. I'm just trying to figure out, because I know that 60%, 90% plan thing created some issues with regard to Park Avenue. So I'm trying to figure out, so everybody has a clear understanding, what's the process from here on out?
So Tony, if I may, I think, so we're shifting after tonight, pending kind of the feedback from you all on kind of what Tony's kind of walked through this evening. We're shifting more from the consult phase of the project for input from the public to more of an informed stage of the project for us to keep everybody updated on where we're moving forward. But our ability to continue iterating on the design gets limited after tonight, unless you all tell us we need to go back to the drawing board. But I think that's.
And will you be communicating with the community that when you're at 60% and when you're at 90%? I'm just trying to figure out, there's been a lot of involvement. I think at our last public meeting, someone came forward with a different plan around the park, or maybe that was eventually embodied here. But again, there's been so much work done. I want to make sure that we're not going to get blindsided by significant public opposition.
So I think there's some touch points where we can kind of communicate updates to folks. I don't.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
So I think we can commit to that. I think that's something we can do. As those plans come together, we can have those posted on the website.
Yeah.
Okay. And those kind of communications. Tony, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, and I've said this after the block meetings that we had, was that essentially every property owner is going to be approached separately because we have to get construction easements signed, Okay. So that really gives them an opportunity to say, what's going on with my property, with my frontage. But they can see we have continuously updated the plans on the website from when we were at 30% all the way up till now, and we'll still continue to make those changes. And as a matter of fact, we will transition from concept, the pretty plan, to the actual engineering drawing, so that people can see that and what's going on and where the limits of disturbance and all that kind of stuff lie. So it'll be a continual process, but we've got to stop somewhere with the concept, and we've got to really move into the design phase, because we could go on forever if that was the case.
Yeah, I'm not challenging that. I'm just trying to make clear what happens next and when it happens, and if citizens have continuing concerns, how can they be addressed? So I think you've addressed that. The second point I had is, has there been any study about traffic diversion? That is, if you narrow the streets, you would at least reduce the speed limit, I used to live on Lincoln Avenue, and the traffic then was significant, and it's much more significant now. Do we have a sense about where the traffic is gonna go if we're successful with some of the traffic calming?
We have not done any of those studies.
Might be helpful to do an origin destination idea, just to figure out, okay, we're dealing with a problem here, but does it move somewhere else? And if so, how can we look at that? Again, that shouldn't slow down this project, but it is something. Is this situation where we're moving traffic from one street to another? So that's it. And two more questions. Arlington, it's in Arlington, right, where it ends there at Yucatan, and that's Arlington. Has there been any discussion of what Arlington's gonna do at this point? Do they have any plans to
No, I have not.
over there?
I have not had any discussions with
It might be
Arlington.
helpful to know, at least let Arlington know that we're doing this, and it'd be wonderful if they'd sort of think about doing some greening on that part, because that's a singularly unattractive.
Well, we got a great resource over at Arlington right now, a guy named Zach Bradley. So and he's an expert on this project.
May not return our calls, but no, just kidding. Yeah, that would be great. And then finally, there is a little bit of transportation history there. I think you mentioned it. I think there was an electric railroad, streetcar situation. Yeah. Is there any, can we be mindful of that? I don't want to load anything more on this project particularly, but there's some sort of recognition or preservation of the elements there that relate to that.
There's signage in that trolley park, that's like a kind of crescent-shaped piece of land
Yep.
where the gravel street
Yeah.
goes behind it. And there used to be signage in there that gave like a little history of trolley, now it's just called Trolley Park and it's kind of overgrown, but I think that's what you're referring to, right? Having some recognition of how it fit into the history of Falls Church.
Yeah, maybe work with the historical commission to see if there might be a sign there or something, at least preserving it, because, and I guess the house there or one of the buildings there was original.
Original trolley stops, yeah.
Okay.
We talked about signage on this, and I can tell you that we will be preserving and maybe trying to update the solar system model that's currently out there as well. So.
It's painted on those sidewalks for those of you who don't have kids. It marks, like, here's where the sun is, and here's where Mercury and Jupiter, like, on the sidewalk. Have you noticed that? As a distance.
Perspective on how
Oh,
close the
my
sun
kids
is
and I used to walk it all the time, so you could get a sense of scale of how far apart the planets are. Is that what you meant, Tony?
How many steps
Yes.
were between them too.
Yes.
It's on the National Mall and on Lincoln Avenue, the two places where that exists.
In the whole world.
That's right.
Other questions?
Oh, and one more historic feature in that area is one of the original cornerstones is right off that street, right on Meridian. Yeah, so, in addition to everything else, interesting history along that road. Thanks.
Okay, other questions? I'm going to get back to you after I get to.
I'll let Justine keep asking the questions.
I just wanted to follow up on Councilmember Snyder's question. If there were to be significant, neighborhood outreach saying this is absolutely terrible, given the short time frame, what happens?
It might be necessary to delay a part or portions of the project. If, for example, the west side revolts and says, hey, we don't want this, then my suggestion would be that we delay that side of the project until later out years to maybe coincide with more intersection work there at Great Falls, because this project was never an intersection project. We've done a lot of stuff to the intersection, but it was never an intersection. But there have been concepts thrown out there of maintaining more parking on the east side, the west side, intersection work there. Then we would probably just go forward with the east side work. There's none of those types of things happening over there. And we would do maybe some of the core stormwater stuff. But It would only be the core stuff. So it would be like maybe the work in the Legion, some of the major pipe facilities, but we wouldn't be able to solve flooding issues in that area. We wouldn't be able to solve flooding issues on the, in the 900 block. You know, I would have to also say project goals wouldn't be met in that instance too. There would be no traffic calming. There'd be no reduction in impervious area from a water quality standpoint. So from a project management standpoint, I would say if that was to happen, that we would postpone that until such time that we could come to some agreement, and then, but we go forward with the other side of the project.
I just want to add to that on as far as the funding implication, if that were to happen, I think it's important to note that if we were to delay or cancel parts of this project, we've already spent a good chunk of money on this project. And if that were to happen farther down the road, when we've spent more of the transportation funding, that would mean deallocating grant funds and potentially paying back grant funds that we've already expended on this project. So from my perspective, for budget and funding, I feel like we're getting close to the end of being able to make those really big, significant decisions and changes. If we go forward, you know, with the plan and the project as it's planned now, then we're committing to those funding. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Debbie or Mary Beth, if you have one.
I just wanted to make a comment to thank both Caitlin and, and you for helping to define that balance, because, when you open up when you go door to door and you talk to everybody about all the potential things that could be changed, you're right, it turns into an intersection project, a traffic management, a bike Falls Church project, and, everybody has their own lens that they're looking at this project in, and they want to be a participant in it. So I think recognizing the limits, the benefits of having that ARPA funds and being able to do this in the first place, but realizing the limits on time frame and scope. And I think you all explaining that both the project meeting the goals as well as the limitations on funding and timing is super helpful. And we just need to continue to spread that word out through the community so everybody has as best understanding as you can. It's complicated, but netting out, like, those are our 5 goals, here's how we're meeting them. Here are the restrictions on our funding based upon what we have and when we have to spend it by is super helpful. So I appreciate you continuing to share that message, and also, listen to as much as we can from the neighborhood within the time frame we have to do that. So thank you.
Mary Beth? Okay, I just had some broader things, since a lot of detailed questions were asked. So as I think about spending $11 million on any big project, I kind of want to start from the place of principles. And so in general, anytime we undertake a big capital investment, I want to make sure we are doing it right the first time, right? Let's not half-ass it and try to go back and fix things. I think second, are we being future-looking? So are we thinking about where we want to be as a community, and does this accomplish those things? And then third, I think we all talked about, which is consensus doesn't mean 100% agreement on everything, but are we doing our best to accomplish all the goals and not let perfect be the enemy of the good? So keeping those 3 things in mind, I guess my broader question is, Tony, do you think this accomplishes the original goals as best we can? And and anywhere where you feel like we could do more, what would you do?
I do feel like it accomplishes the goals. Again, we warded off as much as possible those other elements, the heavy intersection project, the big Bike America project or Bike Falls Church project. Those were kind of big items, I tell the joke, I don't know if you've seen The Color Purple, Oprah Winfrey goes, I had to fight my mama, I had to fight my daddy, I had to fight my brothers, and sometimes that's how I felt, in trying to push this forward. But I think it does, it does meet those goals. I mean, it meets the water quality goals. We are reducing imperviousness while at the same time making sidewalks, putting more sidewalks out there. We are going to get some water quality benefits out of this, including not only tree planting, but BMPs and things like that. And I'll be the first to admit, I was gung-ho on keeping one side of that street non-parking, and I think that, you know, even I've grown through that process to include more parking but to look at trying to solve those, the traffic calming issues and things like that in some different ways, you know? So, yeah, I feel like we've met our goals there, and I think that it will be everybody will be happy for it. Look, CIPs from a project manager standpoint are thankless projects, right? You know, nobody's going to be happy at the end of not everybody will be happy at the end of the day.
So I guess for the neighbors in the room and who might be watching, I think know that I guess all the comments, between the comment response matrix and the emails that we received, I think staff has done a really diligent job of trying to do our best to balance all those considerations. So we are hearing you. We may not be able to address everything, but those comments were definitely heard. My second question is, so also I guess I have to disclose that I also used to live in Lincoln Avenue at 921. In fact, so I actually know Lincoln quite well, and I ran on it recently just to get to know the street better. So in particular, I totally would support the no right on red at that intersection. I've actually experienced 3 car accidents living there myself, and so I understand that intersection quite well as worry about parking being too close to that corner. So I think that's something that in the new design accounts for some of the safety hazards. But on that note, while we are dramatically changing the street, are we fixing the known issues on Lincoln? So the one in particular, I think, is Oak and Lincoln, as well as Greenwich. I think we've had some issues about crossings. Do you think the design as proposed now addresses the sightline issues adequately, or is that something that we can have further follow-ups on?
It will address the sightline issue.
Okay.
Staff has just recently made it very important. Internal staff has made it a priority to look at every single intersection there to make sure that we have adequate sightline distances for turning vehicles and the like. So I think it does fix those problems. It does calm the traffic. I think Andrew Olson at one point gave me an A+ on the project as far as the project, what we had, and there are others that support, authors in the background here that has said that this, you know, it's meeting its goals while balancing everybody else's. And so there'll be people that may not like everything, but I think overall we've balanced everybody's needs.
For Lincoln and Oak in particular, given that we had a recent accident there, I know that's one of the things we asked the rapid response team, if there's any short-term things that can be addressed, knowing that we're not going to start construction on this for another year or so. It'd be great to, again, consider if there's any additional safety things that we can do as a near-term item that doesn't impact the Greening Lincoln project. Okay, that's helpful. And then my last one is the comment I think earlier, which is, let's make sure we're clear on the expectations going forward. So I'm hearing that at 60%, things are really locked in. And we are, I think, as Andy said, transitioning from the consulting phase to the informed phase. And so while I know that may be disappointing to some, I think we have to move at some point. So I think that needs to be clear to the community. And then just keep us informed along the way. So, any final thoughts? Otherwise, I think after 2 hours, you can definitely tell we really dug into this one. Okay.
All right, thank you, Council.
Great.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you,
Thanks again, Tony and Caitlin.
Thank you, guys.
Debbie proposes we skip the rest of the items. Well, we're going to make up time. We're going to make up time because the next few are quick, right? Okay. While people are getting snacks, do you want to just quickly queue up item B?
Sure. So what's before council is a resolution to reestablish the Community Criminal Justice Board. This is something that for communities across Virginia that have programs to work with defendants for pretrial diversion programs or post-trial probationary programs, that if you have those programs in place, which we do in partnership with Arlington County, that we should have this board that is a mix of public safety, human services staff, and community members to monitor this program and to continue to make sure measure its effectiveness and things like that. So that is the request. This does have appointments that would then follow at a later meeting of the city council. Once this board is reestablished, those appointments have been worked out at the political level between the county board and representatives of the city council. Thank you, Mayor Hardy, for your work on this. And in a nutshell, we would have 2 government appointees. Those, we're envisioning those to be the city manager's recommendation, but the appointments would be made by the city council, a city council representative, and a community member representative. So all 4 appointed by the city council. I'll stop there and be happy to answer any questions. I want to thank Sally, who put this together, and she probably actually should have spoken to this item, and Maria and her office put the staff report together and did a great job on it.
And Marie did a hard work, so she did great. And Veronica too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so an update from the staff report that happened today was that we're getting 2 seats for government reps, and then 1 for a resident and 1 for council, so I don't know if that's been updated.
Yeah, so we have not updated that in writing. So for the council's awareness, we're recommending that, my recommendation is going to be Chief Fard and Sheriff Kay would be the 2 government representatives. That could change over time, but that would, I'm anticipating that's going to be my recommendation to the city council.
Oh, excuse me, I don't sound rude. Any questions on this one? Dave?
I do. What metrics are used to determine the success or less than success of these programs?
I do not know the answer to that.
This is just being reconstituted, and there's just the first year of being reconstituted, there will be a strategic planning process. So I don't believe that there are metrics that are currently set within this body of review. The meeting that I attended last week was just discussing, there were judges, Department of Health and Human Services, community members, elected officials, police, sheriff, discussing the challenges. So they were just that was not metrics, it was not based on data, it was based on an experience for the judges in the courts and those who are running the homeless shelters. So my understanding is that the next year of work will be setting a strategic plan for this group.
That's a good answer. Thank you.
Yeah, Arlington said the board used to exist. So Dave, you might remember when the Arlington Falls Church version used to exist, and this is really resurrecting it again. And I think as part of that process, that strategic planning will happen.
I'm happy to share that there's a calendar for the work for the next year or so that I can share with anybody who's interested.
Okay, well, thanks for the work.
Erin?
Yeah, so I guess looking at the legal provision, it reads as though when it's multi-jurisdictional board, that both jurisdictions would have equal representation on the board, though I understand, given kind of the size of, proportionality for Arlington and Falls Church, that, so long as we are agreeing to something other than kind of equal representation, that's fine, and that's fine, by me, especially given our structure in, who sits where, even though they deliver services here for us too. I think that the second city government position makes sense, to have possibly, 4 people. And I guess reflecting on it now, when I was kind of looking at the composition of the required board members versus sort of the optional seats, then in my mind and kind of experience in terms of looking at pretrial, services, pretrial diversion services, post-incarceration, alternatives to incarceration on the back end of sentences, the things that often arise, are kind of mental health and disability-related issues, housing-related issues, kind of reentry programs, workforce programs, kind of the differences in thinking about recidivist versus non-recidivist sort of populations. And so I guess in thinking about who it is that we put on this board, ultimately I think we're likely deferring, to kind of your recommendation, or if it would be the police chief and the sheriff. I guess, what I'm asking is to maybe reflect on the composition of the board and who's already there, and whether it, makes sense to have both the police chief and the sheriff, given that they work closely together, or if it makes sense to kind of have someone who's in sort of the service delivery kind of world for the population that we're talking about, in terms of what helps people succeed outside of like direct contact with a probation officer, to kind of stay out of criminal justice system by putting the community supports in place that people need to succeed. So I guess that would be
one
my
of the points that we
comment.
discussed in the meeting last week with regard to each of those subsets, and the representation from Arlington, you can see reflects that. Some of their community organizations were like OAR, the folks who work with job placement, post,
The community services boards and those things, so that's what I mean, just in terms of when it comes to us and when it comes to us for sort of appointment, I'm just putting it out there now in terms of,
I think it'd be staff
the
and it could be the
resident
community
and the,
representative.
yeah.
Like one of the community representatives there was a member of NAACP Arlington, for instance, and wanted to make sure that voice was heard from the community.
Right.
So I think you can address it both staff and the
Yeah.
resident appointment, both.
Yep.
But it was an interesting broad brush, and you're exactly right. It's, it was pretty interesting to have the judges who are making the decisions there with the people who are actually finding housing, finding jobs, So, yeah, I agree with you completely. It's what the net of what I'm saying.
Yeah, that was
We're
all.
right on track from what was happening at that meeting.
I also noticed kind of a lack of at least City of Falls Church social services representation. And one oddity is that our social services are provided through Fairfax County and not through Arlington County. So our representation in terms of social services won't be on this particular board. So I noticed that. I don't know if that's an issue. I think over the first year of strategic planning, maybe some thoughts about that can come out of that group.
Okay,
Yeah, great. Another great point.
thank you, Debbie, for going last week. Okay, well, I think we're scheduled to adopt this by resolution next week, so. Okay, moving on to the third item, Virginia Village.
All right, well, thank you. We're joined tonight, we have Brendan Woodley, who's joining virtually, as well as Dana Jones. And the team that's been working on Virginia Village has been Cindy, Brendan, and Dana, really over the past 2 years, working with the City Council, working with the EDA, working with the Housing Commission principally. As I reported during the City Manager's report last week, we've been informed by Virginia Housing that we had encouraged Wesley to apply for an interim loan, and upon getting that loan, the plan was that then Wesley would be able to reimburse the EDA for the $925,000 it has put into the Virginia Village acquisitions, and the City of Falls Church for the $2 million out of capital reserves. And then at that time, title would be transferred to Wesley Housing. And so with that announcement from Virginia Housing that interim financing will not be forthcoming, we wanted to have a discussion with council about next steps. We are recommending that a part of that discussion occur in closed session tonight to talk specifically about properties that the city might want to encourage Wesley to acquire using public funds as a pathway to a potential redevelopment at the Virginia Village site, and also to put some guardrails around in terms of the negotiating position of public dollars that could be used for that purpose. So we do recommend a closed session for that discussion. The other thing I just want to note is that the city has been very successful in getting grant funds to help with this effort, including Amazon Reach funds and funds that we've gotten from Housing and Urban Development through the community enhancements programs and with the support of Congressman Don Beyer. And so there is funding available right now to reimburse the EDA and the City Council if that were your top priority and your top choice. Those funds are available, and we could do that tomorrow. However, one of the consequences of doing that is that the future acquisitions would be stalled for a period of time as we go out to get some additional grant funds and be able to continue the acquisition program. So that's sort of a public part of the discussion about sort of that trade-off. And in addition, Mr. Woodley has put in for grant funds to help us with a facilitator to stand up the redevelopment work group, which is envisioned in the original memorandum of understanding with Wesley Housing. We have a grant for $36,000 to help facilitate that work. And so one of the things we wanted to put on the table tonight was to get direction from the council to begin to put that work group together. And that work group will look at things like what the buildings would look like, what the configuration on the site would be, what the mix of incomes that we'd be seeking to serve on the site, mixes of uses, and putting together essentially a conceptual plan as well as a conceptual financing plan for such redevelopments in the future. So that's one element of the memo that's before the council tonight. So that is a few notes just at a high level. Let me just invite Mr. Woodley if there are other key details that I've overlooked or additional context that he'd like to provide for the City Council you know, on this sort of the larger topic of what we're trying to accomplish here with the Virginia Village project. And then after that, answer any questions
Sure.
that you have.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you probably covered most of it, Wyatt, but thank you for kind of giving that introduction. Just pointing out a couple things on the memo that we provided as part of the packet tonight. We talked a little bit about, after we found out about the news with Virginia Housing, kind of our first instinct as a project team was to go and look at other alternate financing options. We looked at LISC, National Housing Trust, and a couple others. These options weren't ideal in that their rates were much closer to market than any interim financing from Virginia Housing. So it kind of made it restricted the size of any loan and the repayment of any loan because of the debt service that would be implied because of those market rates. We're also pointing out on line 52 of the memo that we prepared a table of sources for the project that explores feasibility of using acquisition funds. And generally speaking, and to kind of reiterate, if the council's decision, the group's decision is to use acquisition funds to repay the city, this would severely restrict the project's liquidity and inhibit its ability to pursue an acquisition / redevelopment strategy. And then we also talk a little bit later in the memo about the recommended disbursement of rental income that, if you recall, a couple months ago, the council approved to the EDA. So we have a disbursement strategy for that. And of course, if you guys see the last page on the memo, there's a map of some ownership of the parcels, which I think might be valuable both for your help in understanding what's going on in that property right now and the subsequent closed session as well.
That's it.
Okay, do we have any other comments on this before we go into closed?
I do.
Okay.
So I guess stepping back more broadly, I don't know if you want to speak to it or if Sally were to speak to it, the current status of the MOU with respect to the project. Like I went back and looked at both the December 2022 MOU and the amended MOU that we did in the spring. And I mean, looking at it, right, it seems premised on the conveyances happening in phase one, the additional parcels that may be assembled, and then, you know, having enough parcels assembled to kind of do any redevelopment. And I understand kind of the concept of phased, you know, redevelopment that we may be able to do, but I'm just, as a general matter, when kind of the foundation of the MOU has been what I would consider like disrupted in kind of a fundamental way, do we need to draft like a new MOU to capture where we currently are and the expectations that we have of like partners that aren't currently reflected in the documents that like would otherwise be seen as somewhat controlling documents?
Cindy, do you want to jump in on that first?
Yeah, if I can jump in on the first piece, not a legal opinion or input. I don't think we've gotten to the point of really looking at what needs to change in the MOU because we need to sort through some of these issues that we're working through. At a core intent, the MOU was sort of set up sequentially, phase 1, 2, and 3, without the bridge loan, which was really just to keep the revolving funding going to continue the acquisition. We are currently looking at it more at the same time instead of sequential because we've lost time and we've also had changing situation. We now own more properties than when that was, you know, first established. So I think we have to look at that. The phase 1 transfer of the ownership was tied and facilitated to the loan and the acquisition because that's the end game for Wesley. But we're in the process of looking at, could you just do the transfer now if we have the phase 3 end plan and look at different financing? So I think while we probably will need to refine the MOU once we sort of have an updated plan, I'm not sure we're there yet, and I know we haven't formally put it into Sally's queue to look at that specific question. And of course, we do have a first reading out there for a tax abatement ordinance, and we're not bringing the second reading to you now because we haven't transferred the properties, but also if you don't have the debt on the properties from that loan, the core underpinning of the reason for the tax abatement until you get to redevelopment is sort of pending. So there's a lot of pieces I think we're still sorting out. A lot of it will probably have some direction after a good closed session discussion.
Yeah, I guess I raised part of it just to, yeah, I think we do need legal review of the MOU just to see like what the status of it is, because looking at it, I would expect that we're gonna need to draft a new MOU, but part of that gets to, maybe you can kind of speak to the commitment, you know, of our different partners, because we're talking about, you know, stakeholders and potentially assembling people to think about what redevelopment might look like, but that presumes that we have the correct stakeholders at the table. And so I guess in terms of, you know, feedback that you have and conversations you've had in terms of ongoing commitment of those we've worked with thus far, and your expectation going forward as to kind of like who comprises that stakeholder group.
Let me start with that, and certainly Brendan and Dana can add in. I do think the two primary partners in this, and 3, because the EDA currently still owns property there, are the right people at the table. Wesley has been working with us since we got the news, and of course they were working with us through the loan to look at alternatives, keep the ball rolling, whether it was financing or, you know, phasing. So I think at this point, we still have the right players at the table as the core members of that MOU partnership. Obviously, as you assemble properties and you need your long-term financing, you'll need more, and the MOU did contemplate that for bringing the other parties to the table, whether it was a financing or a private developer. So that's built in there. In the Virginia Housing response, when they notified us that the interim bridge loan was not within their underwriting normal programming, it was a little too much out of the box right now for them, They did say that, you know, if there was a phased development plan or some more confirmed acquisition strategy, that then getting back into their conversation on their normal financing is an option. So they had left that door open, whether it's their equity funds or their 4 or 9% tax credits. But Wesley and Brendan have been working with LISC and some of the other options out there. Wesley has already been looking at putting an application in for the Amazon money that's out there, and Brendan had also alerted them to some Fairfax housing development money that's out there. So I would say Wesley is still the right partner at this stage, plus.
Do you have, I mean, this gets back to an earlier conversation, and I ask for, you know, more transparency reasons. Do you have a sense of that proof of concept plan that was developed by Wesley, I guess, for its board of directors? And do you know, was there city input into that? And did it in any way, like, was there a disconnect between what that redevelopment plan looked like and what the city, you know, may or may not envision in terms of like the scope or the intensity of that proof of concept?
So staff was not involved in the development of that proof of concept. What I think staff was viewing is that this work group that I mentioned would be the venue for that discussion. So I think staff felt fairly constrained about their ability to kind of get ahead of that process. It is not uncommon for developers to put plans in front of staff and say, what do you think? And we typically will say a few things, but we'll mostly say, you know, we're not here to design this for you. You know, there's going to be a process eventually, you know, by which you have to kind of follow all of our zoning rules, and we'll start that when you're actually ready to start it. So that's those concepts are very much Wesley's concepts. I don't think the city has any identification with those.
And but you're confident in terms of Wesley appreciating that the city would need to have input, and that proof of concept may ultimately differ and could differ significantly based on like what the city input or stakeholder input is?
Yes, I'm very confident in that. That's built into the MOU. That's been our discussion since day one, up to the point of even having terms in there for the divorce, as we called it, if we needed to. We are not there. I think also it's important to put into context what they developed as their concept. It was after meeting with planning staff and zoning just to learn what is our code, sort of the maximum you could, and to look at sort of the financial feasibility to make sure that there was a long game option. But I think the reason that it was for their board and not a big engagement was it wasn't intended to be the end game with the community working group, which is spelled out in the work plan. As well as we've got the South Washington Area Plan, Comp Plan, and other guiding principles to feed into a plan. So we were not involved in, as Wyatt said, a sort of financially zoning feasible plan.
No, that's all helpful to know, and to just confirm. On the 5 city-owned properties that we had anticipated would have conveyed at closing, but we still retain ownership of, what is the status of sort of the management of those companies and like obligations? You know, are we kind of directly servicing those properties at this point in time, or does Wesley have involvement beyond the Wesley housing owned?
So we're currently managing those. I don't know if Dana Jones wants to speak to it. We have a contractor that serves as our project manager or property manager.
Yes. Good evening, all. We are contracting with Promax, and Kayleen Marks, our housing specialist, is the staff person that works with them, and they take care of, you know, collecting rents, you know, the maintenance, if there's any kind of building issue, like with the roof or whatever, they handle all of those things, and they work directly with the city on that. and they have for some time.
Thank you. And then I guess, yeah, my last comment on it is just, I support the preservation of affordable housing. I, would support trying to obtain more of these parcels in terms of preserving affordable housing. I think it's an important thing we need to do, and, something that we definitely need in the city, and that despite our, ongoing development is still an area in which we, need to be more focused and committed. And so, I say that, and at the same time also, have an expectation that it is going to be, and maybe more public and transparent and visible as to, what it is that we are talking about in terms of redevelopment and getting public input into, what that looks like, and, keeping or replacing or maintaining, let's say, 80 units, right? At what intensity do you build in order to keep 80 units versus like preserving 80 units and getting as many more as you can, while still being able to kind of use the land effectively, and, hit different incomes and kind of price points than what we're kind of effectively doing in some other development in the city right now.
Okay. Other questions or comments in open session? Dave?
What's the financial impact if we don't agree to be paid back? What impact will that have on city or EDA projects?
So we're going to discuss the EDA impacts with the EDA tomorrow night. They plan to have a discussion about this as well. And so I think that's the discussion for them, is what is the opportunity cost, or what are other projects that they will not be able to proceed with. So we'll let that evaluation happen. Where they paid for this was out of their land acquisition funding that was intended to help them incentivize economic development through strategic land acquisitions. That's the funding that they used to acquire one of the units. And so that's sort of the short answer, is that program is impacted by the fact that the money is tied up in this purpose.
How about other city programs?
So in the city, we have $2 million from capital reserves, and so this does have an impact on the CIP. We were assuming that we would get that $2 million back, and that it would be programmed in the CIP, and we can provide the council with sort of the listing of how those funds could impact the CIP. In some respects, there's some discretion in terms of how that $2 million would be, $2 million would be impacted over the 6-year CIP, because that's where the money was taken from, is from capital reserves, which is used to fund projects throughout the whole 6-year term of the CIP. Mm-hmm. And Cindy, I know the staff's been doing some work on that. I don't know if you have anything that we can speak to specifically about that. We were anticipating we'd have that discussion in the context of the year-end financial report next week.
Correct. Nothing specific for tonight.
The bottom line is we would try to make it so the impacts are on the out years of the CIP rather than in the immediate first and second year of the CIP.
As it relates to the EDA, they have asked for the rental income proceeds from the property that they own. I think about $200,000. I think the staff report recommends only $150 of that, so we keep $50 for capital expenses related to the unit.
Yeah, that would just be contingency until it transfers to Wesley, and then they take over. And so that would, in the near term, give EDA some cash flow, but that is, as Mr. Shields indicated, the conversation with the EDA tomorrow evening.
Thanks.
Other questions or comments? So going back to the MOU, I think one thing that I remember from our 2021 discussions and creation of the MOU was keeping flexibility for additional partners. And so I think one thing that's been pretty consistent, I think, among past councils, current councils, and the EDA is the idea of thinking about mixed income and not creating areas of concentrated poverty. So given the opportunity to potentially need to revisit the relationship here, I do think this is a good time to remind ourselves about the idea of having a market rate third partner potentially, and think about how that could fit in. So I know that should not be news to Wesley, given that we discussed it extensively during the creation of the MOU, but that's one point I want to bring up again.
Yes, and we've recently have had that conversation with Wesley, and even when you look at, let's say, a LIHTC project, when you do 4 and 9% tax credits, you usually have a for-profit private developer as part of the partnership.
Yeah, so where that could be helpful is that Wesley traditionally has experience only in LIHTC funded projects using 6% or 9%, so it's majority affordable, which is great. But if you want to think about having some market rate that would cross-subsidize the cost of the affordable housing, you could then have 80% units, 120% units. That would help offset the cost of some of the affordable units. So it just seems to make sense, and it would accomplish multiple community objectives that way.
And even under the tax credits, you can do an average income so that it averages out to 80% AMI, but you can go 30 to 120, or you can have a separate building. I mean, there's a lot of options. And that's where the working group and the community engagement piece with the grant that HHS has gotten, which will allow us to unpack that a lot more.
Yep. And then on that point, good segue. So I remember the Housing Commission, and I think now the Affordable Living Work Group is undertaking kind of our housing goals, right? How many units we need to produce by what date. And they were pretty ambitious if we want to hit those, both affordable and middle income housing goals. And given the math involved of, just doing inclusionary zoning, like we're not going to solve affordable housing with just 10% units in new mixed-use projects. That's just not going to create enough units. I do think we need a more serious commitment towards affordable housing, and I think this is our bet. And so I think keeping our, money in it while we explore options is my preference on kind of a way forward, given those really ambitious goals we have as a community. So that's it. Okay. So we go into close now. Do we stay here, or do we want to? We'll go into close here and then move to Oak.
If I could, just to take the cue off of the last thing you said, if I could just highlight one sentence in the staff report for council, at line 139. I'm sorry. At line 115. We are going to go into closed session to talk about some strategic acquisitions that might be able to get us towards the phase 1 redevelopment sooner rather than later. And one of the notes in the staff report is that with a redevelopment, there are its own financing challenges that come with any redevelopment. And so when we get into that mode, it may not be still a question of pulling our money out of the project. It's going to be a discussion about what's the public subsidy needed to help making a redevelopment happen. And I just want to kind of highlight that point as well.
I guess in that case, part of the reason that we weren't able to get the mortgage, or the funding was because there wasn't a clear development. So I'm guessing that once we do get to the place where we do have a development plan in place, then it would be possible to get that funding.
Well, that's the point I'm making.
Yeah.
We may not, is the point.
Oh, okay.
What I want to sort of just be clear about as we go into this, that this is all very difficult to do. Mm. And so in a phase 1 redevelopment, what we see in other jurisdictions is that there needs to be a whole stack of financing, including a loan, including LITC, including money from the local jurisdiction. And so that redevelopment may not be an opportunity to pull money out.
Okay.
It might actually be a call for more money to go in.
I see. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. I'm going to start the closed session now. On a motion made by council member seconded by council member
Connolly.
My mic was off. And passed by a vote of the City Council, council went into closed session pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-3711A3 for discussion or consideration of the acquisition of real property for a public purpose where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body. The Closed session will be for the purpose of discussing funding the acquisition of specific parcels of real property located in Virginia Village in order to increase the city's affordable housing stock. And such discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body. Councilmember Connolly?
Yes.
Flynn?
Yes.
Sean Siska?
Yes.
Snyder?
Yeah.
Underhill?
Yeah.
Hardy? Yes. Okay, we're going in, time is 10:04.
All right, Dana and Brendan, we'll see you in the other meeting link.
Sophie made an amazing city seal pinata.
He and his son came to the
Is that supposed to be
by accident. You know, to get ice cream, and then I stumbled upon
Oh, right.
that.
We're talking about pinata.
Okay. Okay, are we cameras on or not yet?
Okay, we're ready.
Okay, this is our coming out motion. Upon a motion made by Councilmember
Connolly?
and seconded by Councilmember
Underhill.
and passed by vote of City Council, council reconvene in open session. Connolly?
Yes.
Flynn?
Yes.
Sean Siskott?
Yes.
Snyder?
Yeah.
Underhill?
Yes.
Hardy, yes. Coming out time is 10:40. Okay, this is a certification. Upon a motion made by Councilmember
Hiscott.
and seconded by Councilmember
Flynn.
and passed by affirmative roll call vote in open session, it was certified that one, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements, and two, only such public business matters were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened, heard, discussed, or considered in the closed session or meeting by the body. Connolly?
Yes.
Flynn?
Yes.
Sean Siskott?
Yes.
Snyder?
Yeah.
Underhill?
Yes.
Hardy, yes. Okay. I think we have one additional motion to make.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion. I move that City Council direct staff to negotiate purchase of the lots discussed in closed session within Virginia Village in partnership with Wesley Housing.
Second.
Call roll, please.
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Ms. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yeah.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Mayor Hardy?
Yes.
That passes.
Thank you. Any other business or items to discuss?
I have one thing. We got a email about sign off on the Broad and Washington project in terms of the Lawton Street paving. Yeah. And I guess having been over there, right, I can understand some of the frustration with kind of the state of like the unevenness and the manhole, like cover bumps and the slanted nature of like the street directly adjacent to the project. And so I was just wondering if you could provide insight both into the condition, sort of at sign off, and then cost implications if we needed to undertake actually paving the street.
So I have asked the city's transportation engineer just to assess it in terms of inclusion in the paving plan for this year or next year. And I'll get an answer back, and I'll provide that at least from a technical perspective of what the transportation engineer thinks on it. It was not part of the voluntary concessions that Lawton Street be repaved, largely because there wasn't supposed to be, the same level of construction activity on Lawton. I think once they got involved in the sewer line in particular, there were more impacts there. But I'll get an answer on that and share that with the city council and share that with the neighbors.
Thank you.
Debbie?
I just had one other comment going back to last week's request on signage at the WNOD trails where we've had cars turning onto them. I know, thank you for the response, which was referring it out to Nova Parks, but I also am wondering what ability we have to add our own Falls Church City signage. I know I don't know what's considered parkland, the WNOD Park trail land that we can't put anything on, or can we look at putting a no right turn right here sign next to our new stop signs or near that?
So we're
Same question, different way, I guess.
yeah. I do want to consult with the park authority on this. Now we do have a wider trail than most parts of the trail, so we are unique in that sense. But in the larger sense, they deal with these problems for the entire 44-mile section of their trail, and they're always very concerned about consistency. And so we'll coordinate with them. We're aware of the problem, and we do want it addressed, but we'd like to do that in good coordination and communication with the Parks Authority.
Okay.
And I would like to reinforce that, plus note that we're working with our traffic engineers for the city. They had some concerns about no right turn on red because it's obviously cars we don't want right turn on red, but we would encourage the bike or scooter, in the bike, I guess, on the WNOD. So we need to make sure that have clear messaging as well as consistent with Nova Parks.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Dave?
Yeah, with upcoming elections, there are a couple programs regarding misinformation, and COG board was briefed by the FBI on foreign interference. Also, I think it's important for council to remember that we're an independent body and that we've got to separate our own personal partisan views from our official roles. So just a reminder to all of us to do that as well. But I haven't heard if there's any other additional election-related issues we ought to be thinking about right now. Wyatt, have you heard any? Or
Nothing specific, probably, that the council's not already aware of. There is a lot of coordination going on. We had a briefing with the CAOs at COG as well, where all of the election officers were invited. Our chief administrative officers, that's the CAO committee with COG, sorry. And our registrar is very plugged into kind of all of that regional surveillance, so that he's aware of if there are regional concerns or national concerns. He's aware of those as well, and he's in regular communication with city police for any assistance he might need. And then one last thing we do, we get audited by the state for our cybersecurity, specifically related to election equipment, and so we go through kind of those protocols as well.
Can I ask, related to elections, and I think maybe Joe Carter, had mentioned something in passing about coordination, but to make sure that, given that we're talking about, high turnout presidential election year, and Oak Street will be open on Election Day, that coordination is taking place in terms of, school security.
Yes.
Okay. I had something. So at the Founders 2 neighborhood meeting, they had mentioned that Dominion's 2 months behind in taking the poles down and underground and getting power to the building. It's causing delays. I'm not sure whether we've escalated to our government relations person at Dominion, or they have their own contact, but it's causing impacts to the project and slowing a bunch of
Just today, I was alerted to that this weekend at the Fall Church Festival, and today I just got the community meeting summary notes. So I have some details, so I will be, but I have not yet.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Nothing else? Let's adjourn. Okay.
All right. Thank
Have a
you,
good night,
council.
Just a reminder, I will not be here on next Monday's meeting. I will not.